let's talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is global change. So global change consists of a number of factors, and some factors you can very easily see. Like, you can see this golf course behind me. So that is an example of land use change where a subtropical forest has been cleared to make way for a golf course. Other examples are roads that you can hear in the background, and also the cities in which we live. So those are incidents of land use change, a very important factor of global change that you can very easily just see or experience. As I already mentioned, roads are also very important, not just because they're sealed surfaces, sealed soil surfaces, but also because they fragment the landscape into different bits they're not as connected as they are before. And of course, we are building more and more things all the time. The amount of land used to urban developments on a global basis is quite impressive. And then, of course, connected to some of those factors of land use change, you have noise, as you can hear right now by this street. And that globally is a factor known as noise pollution. It's quite important on land, but it's also important, very, very important in the ocean and aquatic systems. And we're also interested in how important that really is in the soil. But noise pollution is another very important factor of global change you can very easily experience. Now, if I were to stay here a little bit longer and you would see all the lights, you would experience another factor of global change, namely light pollution. And that is also a very significant factor that affects especially insects, other animals, potentially also plants, and we've also shown that soil may be affected. Another factor that you can very easily see are certain forms of chemical pollution. You can see, for example, all this blue foil and white foil used in this construction zone behind me. That is also very clearly visible and is an factor of plastic, is an example of plastic pollution. And of course, as you walk around just about anywhere, you can also see discarded single-use plastic, like this blue thing there behind me. That's also basically ever present in our landscapes. And when that plastic material fragments and disintegrates, but doesn't decompose, then you have the creation of something called microplastics. Microplastics are just defined as plastic smaller than 5 millimeters, something that we've worked a lot on in my group. So that's another example of plastic pollution, which is in itself an example of chemical pollution. Now, those are all examples of things you can see. You may also be able to see invasive plants, if there are any here. Don't know enough about this place to say if there are. But certainly invasive plants are also something with sufficient knowledge that you can basically identify as a factor of global change fairly easily. But the tricky bit is that there are also a whole lot of factors that you cannot immediately perceive because we just don't have any sensors for them. Like, for example, there is increased concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere, and we simply cannot detect it. But that concentration goes up steadily every year. And so I did my PhD thesis on elevated concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere and its effects on plants and mycorrhizae. And my ambient, when I did my PhD in 1997, was 350, and now the concentration is much higher, it's around 420 or above. So that has increased during my career quite substantially. That's not something you can see or perceive at all. Yeah, other examples of that are basically climate change, which could be incidents of drought, flooding, heat events, average increases in temperature and things like that, you can of course experience those. You can experience a very hot summer day, but in each individual case, you may not really know if this is a signature of climate change, because there have always been hot days and there's always been droughts. And so basically climate change relies on you identifying a signature from long-term trends. And so that is also really not something that you can immediately experience yourself. You need basically that time series to make that call. Well, and as I stand here, I don't know what the values here are, but back home in Berlin, maybe the values are about 30, 40 or so, maybe a little bit less, kilograms per hectare per year of nitrogen that just falls out of the atmosphere. It's quite a significant enrichment in terms of nitrogen in terrestrial ecosystems and other systems as well, of course. So that is another factor that you cannot experience at all. And then, of course, there is the huge number of organic chemical pollutions and also inorganic pollutants, such as copper and other heavy metals, but also persistent organic pollutants such as PFAS and many others that we simply, we have no senses for. We cannot detect these things. We need basically analytical chemistry to tell us if that stuff is there. So the bottom line is, and the list of factors goes on and on. I've only touched on some of the more important ones maybe, but the point is some of them you can really directly experience, and others you really need quite a bit of analytics to basically know that they are there and to what extent they are currently present. So there are people that deny the existence of climate change, not scientists, mind you, but probably people that are politically motivated. But I always find that kind of amusing, since I work on global change, which is so much more very hard to basically deny the very existence of all the things that we have otherwise done to this planet that are quite visible to everybody and that are as much a part of global change as climate change is. Yeah, and with these thoughts, see you later. Bye.